Lee Jun walked into the xenobiology classroom with his usual calm expression. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences was still new to him, but he was getting used to the strange looks from other students. Being one of only 12 humans at the academy made him stand out, especially since most aliens thought humans were dangerous. The classroom was large and circular, with seats arranged around a central platform. Jun took his usual spot next to Yoon Hana, his friend and study partner. She was already setting up her tablet and sketchpad, ready for another day of learning about alien life forms. Professor Kyle entered the room, his reptilian features showing clear displeasure. The Vraxian instructor had made it obvious from day one that he did not want humans in his advanced class. His yellow eyes always seemed to linger on the human students with something that looked like fear, mixed with anger. "Today we have a special practical examination," Professor Kale announced, his voice carrying a strange tone that made several alien students shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You will observe and analyze a live specimen from a Class 12 death world." The room fell silent. Class 12 death worlds were places so dangerous that most galactic species avoided them completely. Even trained xenobiologists rarely worked with creatures from such hostile environments. Jun noticed that Professor Kyle kept glancing at him and Hana, as if waiting for some kind of reaction. The other human students in the class also seemed to catch the instructor's attention. "The specimen comes from Nexar Prime," Professor Kale continued, "and it is what the Nexari call a shadow stalker. It is an apex predator that hunts using both physical prowess and psychic fear projection." Several students made worried sounds. The insectoid Kalan students clicked their mandibles nervously, while the peaceful Aquarans began to change color in distress. Two security guards wheeled in a large metal cage covered with a thick black cloth. Even through the covering, something moved inside with fluid, predatory grace. A low growling sound filled the room, making most students lean back in their seats. "Your task," Professor Kale said, with what might have been a smile on his reptilian face, "is to observe and document the creature's behavior patterns. This will test your ability to work under pressure with dangerous specimens." Commander Thex, the station's security chief, stood near the door with several armed guards. The Kalan officer's compound eyes focused on the cage with obvious concern. "Sir," Commander Thex said carefully, "perhaps we should warn the students about the creature's fear projection abilities. It can cause panic in most species." Professor Kale waved away the concern. "They are advanced students. They should be able to handle any challenges in their field of study." Jun exchanged a look with Hana. Something about this felt wrong. Practical examinations usually came with proper preparation and safety briefings. This seemed rushed and poorly planned. The professor moved to the cage and placed his hand on the covering cloth. "You may begin your observations now." With a swift motion, he pulled away the cloth. The creature inside was magnificent and terrifying. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a body like a giant cat but covered in dark, almost metallic fur. Its muscles moved under its skin like liquid power. Forearms ended in claws that could easily tear through metal, and its face held intelligence that was both alien and predatory. 6 eyes glowed with a cold, calculating light. The moment the cloth came away, waves of psychic fear washed over the room. It hit the alien students like a physical force. Most of them cried out and stumbled backward. Several ran for the exits while others froze in terror. But Jun felt the fear differently. It touched his mind, but instead of paralyzing him, it felt familiar. He had experienced similar sensations before, growing up on the frontier colony where his family farmed. Many of the creatures they worked with projected emotions to communicate or defend themselves. He pulled out his tablet and began taking notes, observing the shadow stalker with scientific interest. The creature's breathing pattern, the way it moved, the angle of its ears, all of these details went into his documentation. Beside him, Hana had started sketching. Her hand moved quickly across her tablet, capturing the creature's anatomy with practiced skill. She seemed as calm as Jun, though he noticed she was breathing more carefully to manage the fear projection. The shadow stalker noticed them immediately. Its 6 eyes focused on the 2 humans who were not running or cowering. It tilted its head, clearly confused by their behavior. Professor Kyle stared at Yoon and Hana in disbelief. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had brought the creature specifically to show these dangerous humans their place. They were supposed to be as frightened as everyone else. "Interesting," June said quietly, making another note. The fear projection seems to be a defensive mechanism rather than an aggressive one. Look at its posture. It's actually quite nervous. Hana nodded, adding details to her sketch. The claws are retracted slightly and its tail is low. If it were truly aggressive, we would see different body language. The few alien students who had not fled watched in amazement. A young Callan named Nix remained near the back of the room, too fascinated by the human behavior to leave. The shadow stalker began pacing in its cage, becoming more agitated. Its fear projection grew stronger, but it seemed frustrated rather than triumphant. The creature was used to its psychic abilities causing immediate submission or flight. The calm response from the humans was clearly unexpected. Professor Kale's plan was backfiring completely. Instead of showing human weakness, the situation was demonstrating something that made him even more uncomfortable. These humans were treating one of the galaxy's most feared predators like an interesting study subject. "Why are they not afraid?" whispered an Aquaran student who had pressed himself against the far wall. Commander Thex moved closer to the cage, his security training overriding his discomfort. "Humans," he said carefully, "you should move back. The creature is becoming agitated." June looked up from his tablet. "Actually, I think it's more confused than agitated. It's trying to communicate through fear projection, but we're not responding the way it expects. This might be similar to how Earth predators use intimidation displays." The shadow stalker suddenly stopped pacing and stared directly at June. For a moment, human and alien predator regarded each other across the space between them. There was no fear in June's eyes, but there was no challenge either. Just calm, scientific interest. That was when the creature's restraints began to fail. The lock on the cage door was designed to be opened from the outside for emergency evacuation, but the shadow stalker's pacing had been working at the mechanism, and its claws had found the weak points. With a sharp crack, the lock broke. The cage door swung open. Every alien in the room either ran or pressed themselves against the walls. Security guards raised their weapons but hesitated to fire in a classroom full of students. Commander Thex shouted orders, but chaos was spreading too quickly. The shadow stalker stepped out of its cage slowly, testing its freedom. It looked around the room at the terrified aliens, then back at the two humans who still sat calmly in their seats. Professor Kyle had backed away until he hit the wall. His plan to intimidate the humans had gone horribly wrong. Now he faced the possibility of students being hurt by a creature he had brought into his classroom without proper safety measures. The shadow stalker took a step toward June and Hana. June set down his tablet and looked directly at the creature. Instead of fear or aggression, his expression showed only curiosity and something that might have been understanding. He had grown up with dangerous animals, and he recognized something in this one that the others had missed. "Hello there," he said softly, his voice carrying none of the panic that filled the room.
"You're a long way from home, aren't you?"
The shadow stalker paused, its head tilting again. The fear projection lessened slightly, as if the creature was as curious about June as he was about it. Hana continued sketching, her movement slow and non-threatening. "Look at those scars on its shoulders," she murmured to June. "I think this one has been through some kind of trauma. It might be more defensive than aggressive." The creature took another step closer, and security guards tensed to fire. The shadow stalker moved closer to June and Hana with careful steps. Its 6 eyes watched them with intelligence that was clearly weighing their strange behavior. The creature's fear projection had weakened, replaced by what seemed like genuine curiosity. June remained perfectly still, but he began speaking in a soft, steady voice. "Easy now. Nobody here wants to hurt you. You're just scared and confused, aren't you?" The words were in standard Galactic, but June mixed in strange sounds that seemed to come naturally to him. They were not quite words, more like gentle noises that somehow felt right for talking to a frightened animal. Professor Kale pressed himself against the wall, watching in horror as his carefully planned lesson turned into something he could not control. "Get away from it!" he hissed at the humans. "That creature could kill you in seconds." But June did not move. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, copying the gesture the shadow stalker had made. The creature noticed this immediately and stopped advancing. "June," Hana said quietly, never looking up from her sketch. "Watch its breathing. See how it slows when you speak softly? And look at its claws. They are retracting more." The young Callan student named Nix had stayed in the back of the room, too fascinated to flee like the others. He watched as the humans did something that seemed impossible. They were calming a creature that his species had feared for generations. Commander Thex kept his weapons ready, but held his fire. His security training told him to eliminate the threat. But something about the scene made him hesitate. The humans genuinely seemed to know what they were doing. "Where did you learn to handle dangerous creatures like this?" Commander Thex asked carefully. June never took his eyes off the Shadow Stalker, but he answered in the same calm voice he was using with the creature. "I grew up on a farming colony. We raised lots of different animals, including some predators that helped keep the crop-eating pests under control. My family has been working with dangerous wildlife for 3 generations. This information sent a new wave of concern through the room. The idea that humans not only lived with deadly predators but actually farmed with them was terrifying to most galactic species." The Shadow Stalker took another step closer, and now it was only a few feet away from June. This close, everyone could see just how massive and powerful the creature was. Its muscles moved like steel cables under its dark fur, and its claws could easily slice through the desk between them. But instead of attacking, the creature did something unexpected. It sat down. The movement was graceful and deliberate, like a giant cat settling into a comfortable position. The fear projection stopped completely, replaced by what felt almost like peaceful curiosity. "Well, I'll be damned," June said with a small smile. "You're not a monster at all, are you? You're just a very big, very smart animal who has been scared and alone." Hana looked up from her sketch for the first time since the creature had escaped. "June, look at its ear position and tail movement. This is classic submission posture for a feline-type predator. It's trying to show us that it is not a threat." Dr. Kim Tae chose that moment to arrive with additional security forces. The human professor of interspecies psychology had been called when reports of the incident reached the administration. She stepped into the classroom and stopped short at the sight before her. A Shadow Stalker sat calmly near 2 human students, while every other person in the room was pressed against the walls in terror. The creature looked more like a very large exotic pet than a deadly predator. "What in the galaxy is going on here?" Dr. Kim Tae asked. Professor Kale stammered as he tried to explain. "I brought the creature for a practical examination. It was supposed to test the student's ability to observe dangerous specimens under pressure. But these he gestured helplessly at June and Hana. "They are not afraid of it." Dr. Kim Tae moved slowly into the room, her trained eye taking in every detail of the situation. As a specialist in interspecies psychology, she had studied human behavior extensively, but she had never seen anything quite like this. "June," she said carefully, "can you tell me what you are doing?" June finally looked away from the Shadow Stalker, though he kept most of his attention on the creature. "It reminds me of the thornback prowlers we kept on the farm. They are big predators that people think are dangerous, but they are actually very social animals. They just need to understand that you are not a threat to them." The Shadow Stalker's head turned toward Dr. Kim Tae when she spoke, but it made no aggressive moves. Instead, it seemed to be listening to the conversation with interest. "The key," Hana added, "is not to show fear, but also not to show dominance. You have to be calm and non-threatening. Look at its body language now compared to when it first came out of the cage. It has relaxed completely." Dr. Kim Tae pulled out her own recording device and began documenting the interaction. This was potentially groundbreaking research into human predator psychology. "The literature says that Shadow Stalkers are impossible to train or domesticate," she said. "They are supposed to be pure killing machines driven only by instinct." June shook his head. "No animal is purely instinctual. They all have emotions and social needs. This one has probably been kept in isolation, maybe studied by researchers who were afraid of it. Look at those scars Hana mentioned. Some of them look like they came from medical equipment." The Shadow Stalker made a soft sound, almost like a purr, but deeper. It was looking directly at June now, and its 6 eyes showed an expression that was unmistakably hopeful. "It wants contact," Hana observed. "See how it leans slightly toward June? It is asking for social interaction." Professor Kale watched in disbelief as his worst fears seemed to be coming true. The humans were not just unafraid of the deadly predator, they were bonding with it. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Humans are supposed to be the dangerous ones." Commander Thex lowered his weapon slightly. "Perhaps," he said thoughtfully, "we have been thinking about this wrong. Maybe the humans are not dangerous because they are predators themselves. Maybe they are dangerous because they can understand predators. The shadow stalker stood up slowly and took one more step toward June. Now it was close enough to touch, if either of them reached out. The creature lowered its massive head and made the purring sound again. June very slowly extended his hand, palm up, letting the creature see that he was not holding anything threatening. "May I?" he asked, as if the shadow stalker could understand the question. The creature sniffed at his hand, then gently touched it with the tip of its nose. The contact was soft and careful, nothing like the violent behavior everyone expected from such a predator. Several people in the room gasped. Dr. Kim, Tay's recording device captured every moment of the unprecedented interaction. "This is remarkable," she whispered. "You have achieved peaceful contact with a creature that has never shown non-aggressive behavior toward any other species." The shadow stalker seemed to enjoy the gentle contact. It pressed its head slightly against June's hand, seeking more of the social interaction it had probably been denied for a long time. Nix, the young Callan student who had stayed to watch, finally found his voice. "How do humans do this? How do you make dangerous creatures trust you?" Hana answered while continuing to sketch the peaceful scene. "We listen to what they are really saying. Most creatures are not actually trying to hurt anyone. They are just trying to communicate their needs or protect themselves. Besides," June added with a smile, "every creature deserves to be understood, not just feared." Professor Kale stared at the scene in complete bewilderment. His plan to show the humans their place had backfired in the worst possible way. Instead of proving human weakness, he had demonstrated something far more disturbing to his mind. Human strength that came not from violence, but from understanding. The shadow stalker settled down beside June's chair, still maintaining gentle contact with his hand. It looked around the room at all the other species, and for the first time, its expression seemed almost friendly. Dr. Kim Tay realized she was witnessing something that would change interspecies relations forever. The implications of humans who could communicate with apex predators were staggering. Word spread through Harmony Station faster than a plasma fire. Within hours, everyone knew about the human students who had tamed a shadow stalker, with nothing but calm words and gentle gestures. The story grew with each telling, and by the end of the day, some versions claimed that June had wrestled the creature into submission with his bare hands. Ambassador Vel arrived at the station 3 days later, and she was furious. The Nexari diplomat was tall and elegant, with silver skin that sparkled when she moved, but her beauty did nothing to hide her anger as she stormed into the Academy's administrative offices. "How dare you," she said to Rector Zephyr, the Academy's head administrator. "You have taken a sacred creature of our people and turned it into a circus animal." Rector Zephyr, a peaceful Aquaran whose skin was currently a nervous shade of purple, tried to calm the situation. "Ambassador, I assure you that no harm came to the shadow stalker. In fact, it seemed quite content with the human students." "Content?" Ambassador Vel's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. "A shadow stalker does not become content. It is a creature of power and mystery, revered by my people for thousands of years, and you let some primitive Deathworlders treat it like a pet." The meeting was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Park Soo, the human military liaison assigned to the station. He was a calm man in his 40s, with the steady manner of someone used to dealing with difficult situations. "Ambassador," he said politely, "I understand your concerns, but I think there might be some misunderstanding about what actually happened." Ambassador Vel turned her anger toward him. "Misunderstanding? Your people have demonstrated that they can control our most feared predator. Do you think we are fools? Do you think we do not understand the implications?" Captain Park Soo frowned. "What implications? If humans can control shadow stalkers," Ambassador Vel said, "then what other creatures can they dominate? What species might be next? Perhaps the Nexari themselves?" The room fell silent. This was the fear that had been growing throughout the station since the incident. Other species were beginning to see human-animal handling abilities not as a useful skill, but as a threat to galactic security. Meanwhile, in the Academy's medical bay, Dr. Choi Young was conducting a thorough examination of the shadow stalker. The human xenobiologist had arrived on the morning transport, called in specifically to assess the creature's condition. June sat nearby, maintaining the gentle contact that seemed to keep the shadow stalker calm during the examination. The creature had refused to cooperate with anyone else, but it remained peaceful as long as June was present. Fascinating, Dr. Choi Young muttered as she reviewed her scanner readings. This creature has been severely stressed for an extended period. Look at these hormone levels. It has been in a constant state of fight-or-flight response. How long? June asked. Months, maybe years. And see these scars? Some are from medical procedures, but others... She paused. Others are from impact weapons. This creature has been hurt repeatedly. The shadow stalker made a soft whining sound as if it understood the conversation. June stroked its head gently and it leaned into the contact. No wonder it was so agitated in the classroom, June said. It was probably expecting more pain and fear. Dr. Choi Young nodded. What you and Hana did was show it something it had never experienced before. Kindness from an intelligent species. That is why it bonded with you so quickly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jin Woo, June's younger brother. He had just arrived on the station as a new student, and he was eager to see the famous shadow stalker everyone was talking about. So this is the creature that has the whole galaxy in an uproar, Jin Woo said with a grin. He approached slowly, copying his brother's calm manner. The shadow stalker looked at him with interest but no fear. It seemed to recognize the family resemblance and accepted Jin Woo's presence easily. Hi there, beautiful, Jin Woo said softly. You have really stirred things up around here. Dr. Choi Young watched as the creature responded positively to another human. This supports my theory, she said. Shadow stalkers may be naturally social creatures that have been misunderstood because of their fear projection abilities. In the administrative offices, the political situation was getting worse. Representatives from a dozen species had arrived to demand explanations or offer military alliances. The Callan wanted to recruit humans for their security forces. The Vraxians wanted humans banned from the academy entirely. The Aquarans were trying to mediate, but their peaceful nature made them ineffective in the heated discussions. The humans must be restricted, insisted Counselor Thane, a Vraxian hardliner. If they can control apex predators, they are too dangerous to move freely through civilized space. Or, suggested General Clax of the Callan military, we should recruit them as allies. Imagine what human soldiers could accomplish if they can turn enemy war beasts into allies. Captain Park Soo listened to both sides with growing frustration. You are all missing the point, he said finally. My people are not trying to control anything. They are simply treating a frightened animal with kindness. Kindness? Ambassador Vell laughed bitterly. You call it kindness to reduce a sacred creature to a tame pet? Before Captain Park Soo could answer, Jin Woo entered the meeting room. The young human had been exploring the station and making friends with alien students, as was his nature. Excuse me, he said politely, but I think you are all worried about the wrong thing. The room turned to look at him. A teenager interrupting a high-level diplomatic meeting was unprecedented. The shadow stalker is not tame, Jin Woo continued. It is just happy for the first time in years. My brother did not control it, he understood it. There is a big difference, Ambassador Vell stared at him. And you think this makes it better? Understanding our sacred creatures? Jin Woo shrugged. Understanding anything is usually better than fearing it. Besides, the shadow stalker seems to like having friends. Maybe your people have been keeping them isolated when they are naturally social. This statement sent new ripples of concern through the assembled diplomats. The idea that their understanding of shadow stalkers might be completely wrong was disturbing to many of them. Elder Mack, an ancient Callan philosopher who rarely spoke at such meetings, finally broke his silence. The young human speaks wisdom, he said in his creaky voice. Perhaps we have forgotten something important in our rush to become civilized. What do you mean, Elder? Asked General Clax. Once all our species knew how to speak with the creatures of our worlds, Elder Mack said. But as we reached for the stars, we lost the old knowledge. Perhaps the humans have kept what we threw away. Back in the medical bay, the shadow stalker had fallen asleep with its head resting against June's leg. Dr. Choi Young was reviewing her findings with growing excitement. This changes everything we know about predator psychology, she said. If shadow stalkers are social creatures, then their fear projection might be a form of communication, not just a weapon. What do you mean? June asked. Think about it. They project emotions into other minds. What if that is how they naturally communicate with their own kind? What if they have been trying to talk to other species all along? But everyone was too frightened to listen. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Choi Young was right, then the entire galactic understanding of predator species was fundamentally flawed. Yoon Hana arrived with news from the diplomatic meetings. "It is getting bad out there," she told them. "Half the galaxy wants to ban humans from space travel, and the other half wants to recruit us for their militaries." June looked down at the sleeping shadow stalker. "All because we were nice to a scared animal." "It is more than that," Dr. Choi Young said thoughtfully. "You have proven that humans have abilities that other species lack. That always makes people nervous." Jinwoo sat down across from his brother. "So what do we do about it?" Jun was quiet for a long moment, gently stroking the shadow stalker's fur. Finally, he looked up with determination in his eyes. "We show them that understanding is better than fear," he said. "We prove that humans are not dangerous because we can control predators, but because we can help others understand them too." 2 weeks after the incident, protests filled the corridors of Harmony Station. Signs in dozens of languages demanded either the removal of humans from the academy or their recruitment for various military purposes. The situation had become so tense that some species were threatening to withdraw from the Galactic Educational Alliance entirely. June stood in the academy's main auditorium, looking out at the crowd of diplomats, students, and media representatives who had gathered for what many believed would be the final hearing on human participation in galactic education. The shadow stalker sat beside him, calm and alert, wearing a special harness that Dr. Choi Young had designed for public appearances. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Rector Zephyr began, his aquaran skin showing nervous rainbow patterns. "We are here today to address the concerns raised about human students and their interaction with dangerous wildlife." Ambassador Vell stood first. "The Nexari position remains unchanged. Humans have demonstrated an unacceptable level of control over sacred creatures. They represent a threat to the natural order of the galaxy." General Clax of the Callan military spoke next. "The Callan Defense Force would like to propose a solution. We offer all human students immediate military scholarships and positions in our Xenobiological Warfare Division." Captain Park Soo shook his head. "Humans did not come to the academy to become weapons. We came to learn and share knowledge peacefully." Elder Mac raised one of his ancient hands. "Perhaps we should hear from the humans themselves before we decide their fate." Rector Zephyr nodded. "Lee Jun, you have requested permission to address this assembly. You may speak." Jun stepped forward, his hand resting gently on the shadow stalker's head. The creature looked around the room with calm curiosity, showing no signs of the aggression that had terrified everyone just weeks ago. "Honored beings," Jun began, "I think there has been a misunderstanding about what happened in Professor Kale's classroom. We did not control this creature. We did not force it to obey us. We simply listened to what it was trying to tell us." "And what was it telling you?" asked Ambassador Vell with obvious skepticism. "That it was scared, lonely, and hurt," June replied. "The same things any intelligent being might feel when trapped in an unfamiliar place with strangers who fear it." Dr. Choi Young stepped forward with a tablet full of research data. "If I may, I would like to share our findings from the past 2 weeks of study." She activated a holographic display that showed brain scans and behavioral patterns. "What we discovered is that shadow stalkers are highly social creatures with complex emotional needs. Their fear projection is not just a weapon, it is their primary form of communication." Murmurs filled the auditorium. This was not what most species expected to hear. "The creature you see here," Dr. Choi Young continued, "has been kept in isolation for over 3 years. It was captured as a juvenile and studied by researchers who were too frightened to provide proper social interaction. By the time it arrived at our academy, it was suffering from severe psychological trauma." Onsol, a human engineering student, stood up in the audience. "Dr. Choi Young, are you saying that the creature's aggressive behavior was actually a cry for help?" "Exactly," Dr. Choi Young nodded. "And humans, because of their unusual resistance to psychic fear projection, were the first beings able to hear that cry and respond appropriately." Professor Kale, who had been sitting quietly in shame since the incident, finally spoke up. "But humans are dangerous. They come from a death world." "Everyone knows this," Jin Woo stood up from his seat. "Professor, may I ask you something? What makes a world dangerous?" "Hostile environment, predators, natural disasters," Professor Kale replied automatically. "Right," Jin Woo nodded. "And what do you think beings need to survive in such places?" Professor Kale paused, thinking. Intelligence, adaptability, cooperation. Cooperation, Jinwoo repeated. Humans survive dangerous places by working together, not by being more dangerous than everything else. We learn to understand our environment instead of just fighting it. Elder Mac made a sound that might have been approval. The young one speaks truth. Perhaps we have confused strength with violence for too long. Yunhana stepped forward with her tablet full of sketches and behavioral notes. With your permission, I would like to propose something. Rector Zephyr gestured for her to continue. What if we established a new program here at the Academy? Not to train humans as weapons, but to teach all species how to better understand the creatures they fear. The auditorium fell silent. This was not what anyone had expected. A predator psychology program, Hana continued, where humans work with alien students to develop better methods for studying dangerous wildlife safely. We could revolutionize xenobiology by learning to communicate with creatures instead of just observing them from a distance. Dr. Choi Young's eyes lit up with excitement. We could start with species that different cultures consider monsters or sacred beasts. Imagine what we might discover if we approach them with understanding instead of fear. Ambassador Vel stood up, her silver skin shimmering with agitation. You want to turn our sacred creatures into research subjects? No, June said quietly. We want to learn from them. There is a difference between using something and understanding it. The shadow stalker made a soft sound and pressed against June's hand. Several people in the audience noticed that the creature seemed to be responding to the emotional tone of the conversation. Nix, the young Callan student who had witnessed the original incident, raised his hand. Could other species learn these techniques? Could you teach us to communicate with predators from our own worlds? That is exactly what we hope to do, June replied. Humans are not special because we are dangerous. We are just used to living with dangerous things, but anyone can learn to listen instead of fear. Captain Park Soo stepped forward. If the Academy approves this program, the Human Colonial Authority would be willing to provide funding and resources. We see this as an opportunity for peaceful cooperation, not military advancement. General Clax looked disappointed but thoughtful. And if we wanted to improve security protocols for dealing with dangerous wildlife on our worlds? We would be happy to help with that too, Dr. Choi Young said. But the focus would be on protection and understanding, not weaponization. Elder Mac spoke again, his ancient voice carrying surprising strength. I have lived for 300 years and I have seen fear divide our species again and again. Perhaps it is time to try understanding instead. Several other elder representatives began nodding in agreement. The tide of opinion in the room was starting to shift. Ambassador Vel looked around at the changing mood. And what of our sacred traditions? What of the proper respect for creatures of power? Respect, June said simply, comes from understanding. How can you truly honor something if you do not know what it needs or feels? The shadow stalker stood up and walked a few steps toward Ambassador Vel. The Nixari diplomat tensed, but the creature simply sat down again and looked at her with what could only be described as gentle curiosity. It wants to meet you, Hana observed, watching the creature's body language. See how it lowered its head slightly? That is a sign of peaceful intent. Ambassador Vel stared at the creature that her people had feared and revered for generations. Slowly, very slowly, she extended her hand toward it. The shadow stalker sniffed delicately at her fingers, then made the soft purring sound that had become familiar to the humans. For the first time in recorded history, a Nexari was making peaceful contact with their sacred predator. Tears appeared in Ambassador Vel's eyes. It is gentle. All creatures can be gentle, June said, when they feel safe and understood. Rector Zephyr called for a formal vote on the proposed predator psychology program. The result was overwhelming approval, with only a few hardline species voting against it. As the assembly dispersed, Elder Mac approached June. Young human, you have given us a great gift today. You have shown us that wisdom lies not in conquering our fears but in understanding them. The shadow stalker seemed to sense the positive mood in the room. It made happy sounds and leaned against several of the alien representatives who had stayed to meet it properly. Professor Kale approached June hesitantly. I owe you an apology, he said. I brought that creature to frighten you, and instead you taught me something important about my own prejudices. No apology needed, June replied with a smile. We all have things to learn about understanding each other. As the auditorium emptied, the shadow stalker curled up peacefully next to June's chair. The crisis had passed, but more importantly, a new era of interspecies cooperation had begun. 6 months later, the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences looked completely different. Where once there had been empty corridors and nervous glances between species, now there was bustling activity and collaborative energy. The new Institute for Human-Alien Collaborative Sciences occupied an entire wing of the station, and students from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible before. June stood in the main laboratory, now wearing the insignia of a teaching assistant. Before him, a group of mixed species. Students observed as he demonstrated calming techniques. With a Callan battle beetle, a creature that had terrorized mining colonies for decades until the Institute proved it was simply protecting its territory. Remember, June told his students, aggression usually comes from fear or misunderstanding. See how the battle beetle's antennae are positioned? It is listening to us, trying to figure out if we are a threat. A young Vraxian student named Kess raised her hand. But my people have always said battle beetles are mindless killing machines. That is what my people said about shadow stalkers, replied Nari, a Nexari student who had joined the program after Ambassador Vel changed her position on human predator research. But look how wrong we were. In the corner of the lab, the original shadow stalker, now affectionately called Companion by the students, watched the lesson with calm interest. The creature had become the unofficial mascot of the Institute, helping to teach new students that understanding was more powerful than fear. Professor Kale entered the lab carrying a data tablet. The Vraxian instructor had undergone a complete transformation since the original incident. He was now one of the program's most enthusiastic supporters and had learned human-animal handling techniques that helped him understand his own species' behavioral patterns better. June, he said, I have the final results from the Aquaran Deep Fisher project. The techniques your team developed have reduced ship attacks by 90%. June smiled. That is wonderful news. What did the Aquaran Council say? They want to hire human consultants permanently for their shipping routes. They said it is the first time in centuries that their people can travel the deep ocean route safely. The success stories had been piling up for months. Human students working with alien partners had solved wildlife conflicts on dozens of worlds. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes with dangerous fauna were now learning to coexist peacefully. Yoon Hana entered the lab with her latest project, a comprehensive guidebook to interspecies, predator psychology, that was already being translated into 47 languages. The book combined human intuitive techniques with rigorous alien scientific methods, creating a new field of study that was revolutionizing xenobiology across the galaxy. The Callan Defense Force just placed an order for 10,000 copies, she announced. They want to retrain their entire wildlife management division. Jin Woo looked up from his workstation, where he was helping a group of alien students design new habitat environments for rescued predators. That is great. How many species are we up to now? 137, Hana replied. And we get new requests every day. Dr. Choi Young joined the group, carrying a communication tablet that was buzzing with incoming messages. I just received approval for the expansion project. We are getting funding to establish satellite institutes on 12 more worlds. The growth of the program had exceeded everyone's expectations. What started as a simple attempt to understand one frightened creature had become a galaxy-wide movement toward better interspecies cooperation. Ansel waved from across the lab, where she was testing new equipment designed to help non-human species detect and interpret the emotional states of various predators. Dr. Choi Young, the empathy amplifiers are working perfectly. The Aquaran students can now sense battle beetle emotions almost as clearly as humans can. This was perhaps the most important breakthrough of all. Instead of just teaching alien species to copy human techniques, the Institute was developing technology that allowed each species to use their own natural abilities more effectively. Elder Mac visited the Institute regularly, often bringing groups of young Callan philosophers to observe the work. Today he sat quietly in a corner, watching as students from 6 different species collaborated on a project to rehabilitate trauma and rescue predators. It is as I said, he told his followers. The humans have reminded us of the old knowledge. But see how they share it freely, helping each species find their own path to understanding. The philosophical implications of the Institute's work were being debated in universities across the galaxy. The idea that dangerous creatures could be partners rather than enemies was changing how many species viewed their place in the universe. Captain Park Sue arrived for his weekly inspection. But these visits had become more social than official. The Human Colonial Authority was so pleased with the program's success that they had assigned additional diplomatic staff to help manage the flood of cooperation requests. "Any new developments I should know about?" he asked June. "Ambassador Vell has asked us to help establish a Shadowstalker conservation program on Nexar Prime," June replied. "It turns out their sacred creatures are actually endangered because they have been kept in isolation for so long." Captain Park Sue nodded approvingly. "And the political situation?" "Much calmer," Dr. Choi Young answered. "The fear that humans were dangerous has mostly been replaced by requests for partnership. Though we do get the occasional group that still thinks we should be weaponized. We just redirect those requests to our conflict resolution program," Jin Woo added with a grin. "Amazing how many military problems turn out to be communication issues." This was another unexpected development. The Institute's expertise in understanding dangerous creatures had led to breakthroughs in resolving territorial conflicts between species. Several border disputes had been solved by treating them as misunderstandings rather than competitions. Lee Min, June's sister, arrived at the Institute leading a group of new human students. As the program had grown, more humans had been recruited from farming, colonies and frontier worlds, people who grew up working with dangerous wildlife and had natural skills for interspecies communication. "Welcome to your new home," she told the arriving students. "You are going to help change the galaxy." The new students looked around in amazement at the bustling institute. They saw humans and aliens working together on projects that seemed impossible, while creatures that were supposed to be deadly monsters played peacefully in rehabilitation enclosures. "Is that really a Shadowstalker?" asked one of the new arrivals, staring at Companion. "That is Companion," June said with a smile. "And if you are very patient and gentle, you might get to meet him properly later." Companion looked up at the sound of his name and made the happy purring sound that had become his trademark. Several alien students waved at him, and he responded with what could only be described as an affectionate gesture. As the day ended, June stood on the observation deck looking out at the stars. The Institute was preparing for its first graduation ceremony, where human and alien students would present joint research projects that addressed wildlife conflicts throughout the galaxy. Hana joined him at the window. "Do you ever think about that first day in Professor Kale's classroom?" "Every day," June replied. "I never imagined that being kind to one frightened animal would lead to all this." "Maybe that is the point," Hana suggested. "Maybe the galaxy needed to remember that kindness is more powerful than fear." Dr. Kim Tae approached them with a final report. "I just finished analyzing the psychological profiles of students who have completed our program. Humans and aliens alike show increased empathy, better problem-solving skills, and significantly reduced fear responses to unfamiliar situations. So we are not just teaching people to handle dangerous animals," June observed. "We are teaching them to handle dangerous situations by understanding instead of fighting." "Exactly," Dr. Kim Tae nodded. "The principles work for any kind of conflict or misunderstanding." Companion padded up to join the group, moving with the fluid grace that had once terrified an entire classroom. Now he was a symbol of how fear could be transformed into friendship through patience and understanding. As they watched, a transport ship arrived carrying diplomats from the Outer Rim territories. These species had been the most resistant to change, but even they were finally sending representatives to learn about the Institute's methods. "You know what I think the real lesson is?" Jinwoo said, joining the group on the observation deck. "What?" June asked. "That humans are not special because we are from a dangerous world. We are special because we learned that survival means cooperation, not conquest, and now we are teaching that to the rest of the galaxy." Companion made his happy sound and settled down beside the group, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new species to understand, and new opportunities to prove that kindness was stronger than fear. But tonight, as students from across the galaxy worked together in harmony, it was clear that the human approach to survival had become something much more important than anyone had imagined. It had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one built on understanding rather than fear, cooperation rather than competition,